Dungeons and Dragons Adventurer, issue 5. Right, so let's check out issue number 5. Some dice and some other stuff and some undead. Hurrah! So first up, just looking at the dice, and obviously these are like some red and black pattern stuff. There you go, kind of like a marbly effect. They look nice, but it's nothing really unique to the magazine. Like, I've seen lots of dice like these in the stores. I've probably got some lying around somewhere, but alright anyway. So moving on to the issue, as we prepare to battle the living dead and enter Neverwinter Wood. So as it says here, it's covered some of the essential rules, and now we're going to cover some more stuff. And it's right, we have covered essential stuff, and now we go through damage, resistant, vulnerability, immunity. A lot of stuff that I think I might have pointed out previously that I'm not sure about it. And now we'll see about it all. And fighters, and then skeletons and some other bits. 3 pillars here, talking about how D&D falls in the 3 categories: exploring, social interaction, or combat. This is a section I'm quite interested in because when I played it like years and years ago when I was little, all we ever did was just basically a room with combat, a room with combat, a room with combat. So it's nice to see some extra stuff, and it hopefully will give you examples and ideas. And I forgot to mention just there, it does say red and black marble dice. Either use them as alternative to dice from issue 1 or give them to your other players. I want to see how many times they repeat that phrase in the following issues anyway. So the exploration pillar doesn't need much explanation, but they got a bit about social interaction, how it could be stuff like paying at the inn or political intrigue or so on. And then combat, which everyone knows about combat. It does say it can be the main bit, but you can mix up with the other 2 pillars if there's too much hack and slash going on. And also, you can do dice checks, but why dice checks if people are role playing well? As a DM, just play on, no need for checks. Now we move on to time. Briefly covered in the first couple of adventures where you had to travel to places, but it told you basically exactly how long it would take to get there. This will cover it a bit more detailed. So the time bit's twofold. Let's talk about combat and how you take your own time. And time's relative. So combat time's tracked in all your rounds, whereas our combat, you can decide how long it is. So if people want a short rest or a long rest, it can just happen instantaneously, unless you've got something you want to happen. But it does also put you could have time constraints, because on a short rest, characters recharge certain abilities, but on a long rest, they heal and fully recharge. So you might want to put a time limit on it so they don't have time for the resting. Moving on to darkness and light, which I thought was to do with dark and light sort of magic or good and evil or whatever. But actually it turns out it's just needing light to see and darkness. And the main bit here is talking about dark vision, which is a natural trait for elves and dwarves, and just describes how it actually works. Something I never really knew. I just knew they had it. I never properly used it. But they can't see colour. They just see shades of grey with it. It doesn't particularly talk here about what light and darkness do affect. But it goes over like the 3 stages of light: bright, dim and darkness. Dim light or even darkness can give characters disadvantage on any rolls involving sight, or any perception checks that rely on sight as well. And even sometimes the darkness can impose the blinding condition, which it says, see conditions part 1, which we can see here. There's the blinding condition. So it states the same again: attack rolls against the creature with blinded have advantage, while the blinding creature rolls with disadvantage. And it automatically fails any things. But a little top tip there: some creatures do have blind sight, like bats, dragons and oozes, which means blindness doesn't affect them for a certain range. And now on to an important section, and we've started a new stage of advice here to do with combat, and this is to do with damage, like damage resistance, being vulnerable, being immune. Damage resistance would have already popped up. We've had at least one enemy you can encounter who's resistant to damage. So here we go, back to let you know. So we know about resistant monsters take half damage rounded down. Vulnerable monsters take double the damage, and immunity take no damage from that particular source of damage. A nice note here to give some feedback. So if a monster's vulnerable or resistant, let the players know by telling them it looks to take more damage or less damage. And it used the example of the swarm of rats in Adventure 1 that took half damage from the different types of attacks. And also, you can just say the characters have encountered a type of creature before, and if they do an intelligence check, they know it's harder to kill with one type of weapon or another. Just a little bit of the maths here, calculating the damage. Always do any other effects first before the resistance. So if you're in a magical aura that reduces damage, reduce the damage first, then half it for resistance. And you can't have multipliers multiple times. So if you're resistant to fire and to non-magical and you get hit by non-magical fire, you only take half damage, not a quarter. Now we move on to fighters. Gladiators, archers, street fighters, swashbucklers, mercenaries, militia, knights. It is the most diverse class and probably like one of the most standard classes you'll get in most forms of games. And again, we just begin with a little overview, just giving you descriptions about fighters. And it says, oh, use some examples. So you got Lord of the Rings, Gimli and Legolas, yep, fair enough. Black Widow from Marvel as a fighter, okay. Hercules, yep, he's definitely a fighter. With a bit more themes there, if you feel like doing a Marvel D&D campaign or a Roman or Greek history campaign. And some important bits here, it tells you about fighters. The fighters are basically versed in everything. They can use any weapon, they can wear any armour, they just generally get taught how to do it all. They don't specialise in all of them, but any fighter can use a rapier or a bow or wield a shield or some armour. But they might not specialise in it, but they can still put it on. It's got different types of armour they can wear there. And it does have like about well-rounded specialists. So from third level, fighters can start concentrating on certain aspects. They can be champions, battle masters, eldritch knights to work on like magic, mixing magic with combat or physical power or martial techniques or so on. And then just the thing here, similar to with the clerics and the members of the church, not every member of the City Watch or the village militia or the Queen's Army is a fighter. They just have like some rudimentary basic knowledge and combat skills. Whereas anyone who's trained, such as veteran soldiers and officers and so on, are fighters. And then we move on to the features. Then you've got the options to use any weapon or armour. And it says here, even though fighters are more straightforward than rogues or wizards or whatever, the abilities they can choose are all varied, so actually no two fighters will be the same. So fighters aren't just a simple, straightforward class. Although a lot of people probably just to pick the straightforward, hit them with stuff class. But to start with, because our fighters can use any weapons, it does give you here the whole list of simple weapons and martial weaponry. So I think there's every single weapon there is now categorised. So if I find any, I'm not sure, I can look it up on here. So you know, fighters are quite difficult. 1 dice 10 plus their constitution modifier. They start with that plus every level, so they have lots of hit points. And they have this second win, which is one of their feats. So as a bonus action, they can recover hit points, like once per rest period. So they need to have a short or long rest to get it again. I don't know if fighters are had, so that makes them even stronger. And then, as it said before, there is a large variety of fighting styles. So archery is a +2 bonus to attacks with ranged weapons. So as it says there, we already have it on our character sheet here. Our fighting style archery bonus. As well as here is our second wind ability listed there. And some of the other stuff you got, so you got blind fighting, you can get better defense, you can protect your allies. You can be better with unarmed fighting, two-handed fighting, great weapon fighting, weapons with one hand, and just that's it for dueling. Many different fighting styles to have. And now, lore time. Moving on to the Neverwinter Wood. Which we've already entered once for our ruined villa. Let's get some more details about the woods. We've got our Neverwinter River that runs through it. It's always warm, heated by the volcano. It's got countless ruins and crumbling castles. There used to be a big elven kingdom here, which has been abandoned following the War of Orcs. So there's scattered wood elf settlements around, but the capital city is returned to nature. It talks about moon elves have used magic to move the remains away, so moon elves must have once resided in the forest. But yeah, here's all the details, all the locations around Neverwinter Wood. There's a handful of sites. Most of these aren't included in the map though, like Cragnor Castle, Agfa's Lair, Thunder Tree, like none of that's on there. Whether or not we'll get an updated map later, which will have more things on it when we get more adventures, possibly. Because that looks quite like the exact map I've got, just with some extra places added. So, you know, maybe in a couple of years' time, when we get that new map that I've seen in the quick looks, I'll probably have all these extra places to adventure to. And with your encounters, you might not encounter any friendlies. You might encounter some creatures, whether they be orcs and goblins, bandits trying to get you, or just nature itself. So wild boars, trents, insect creatures, and so on. And possibly the Emerald Enclave, who are some wilderness survivalists, so you could have some help along the way if you're lucky. Now moving on to our next creature, skeletons. So we keep with the undead theme, so we could have that for quite a while. Skeletons are a standard monster, so it's interesting to see how they are at the minute. So to get them, either a magic user is going to raise them, or it could just be a place of dark magic, like corrupted, evil, saturated death and loss. Most of the stuff there, skeletons just mindless. They just obey the person who raised them. They don't eat, drink or sleep. They've got dark vision, which is something I never really thought about before. No sense of self-preservation, and they're weak to bludgeoning damage, obviously. And so more information about skeletons. Resurrecting the skeleton actually dispels the dark magic that animated it and restores its body and soul. Any skeletons that are formed by like natural dark energies will just kind of do stuff it might have done in life. So minor skeletons might raise a pick and so on. They've got limited intelligence. They're not idiot, but they just have limited intelligence. So if you give them instructions, they'll follow it out as literal as they can. They could even do stuff like load catapults and stuff, as long as you give them very detailed instructions. If they try to go through a door, they won't just batter on it till their arms disintegrate. They'll try the handle first, because they're not idiots. They're not mindless. They just lack intellect. And a bit here, skeletons encounter living creatures. The necrotic energy drives them to attack them and kill them unless commanded otherwise. So they will attack anything living on sight. And now we're going to move on to Encounter 5 of Adventure 1, Crypt of the Elf Lord. And again, Dungeon Master's eyes only. So if you plan on running this adventure and you're not the DM, just follow the chapters to move on past here. So the Crypt of the Elf Lord. Again, you're just going to use your pre-generated characters from issue 1 or create your own characters. And we're going to go into the woods and we're going to find the sacred grounds of Iliab Ruin after being alerted by a local tearaway. And to complete it, the adventurers has to come back alive. There's going to be lots of monsters, lots of treasure. They can do what they want until they've decided they're done. So to start with, we just begin the encounter after this little chap here, Carp, comes and tells the adventurers about his finds and his discoveries. There's a bit more stuff to do with elves, so he's got some elven phrase. Let's see if you can translate it. If you've still got your elf in the party, if not, there are some elves that live in Phandalin. Travelling to the crypt, and now time becomes important because this is time sensitive, so you can only get in the crypt at night time to enter it. But you can also only leave it during night time, so it says to track time in there. If they have any long rests or anything, they're going to get stuck in there by the sounds of it. And even in the crypt features now, it's talking about light as well. So we've got time and we've got light. So you're going to have a lot of disadvantages in here if you don't have any night vision, dim vision, dark vision, etc. Now, top tip, use the figures that came in the last issue and the map over the page, which we'll have a look at. And all I can see is the first location's a nice little trap to set the scene. But the other way to set the mood, dim the lights and play some ethereal music. And now we get to the main body of the adventure. So here's the map it was talking about. I'm assuming maybe you'd scan this in and just print it out in a bigger format. Then you can sort of cut it up and just give them one room at a time as they find stuff. And you're going to have a couple of elves here, as I said, but they're not actually elves. It's skeletons under illusion. And we've got this skeleton stat block here. So we've had the lore and now we've got the stats about them. Funny, languages, understands all languages in human life but can't speak. So I'm just going to assume these elves understand elf and common, I guess. And then we've got Perrin's tomb at the end. And Perrin's got actually a little puzzle to summon him, it turns out. I have to see if my adventurers can figure that out or if they're just going to pour coins in all his goblets. Wait and see. It's nice to see. It also says even if they don't manage to solve the puzzle, they can just do by combat instead. So they can either do a social encounter and solve a puzzle, or they can just do a combat encounter and defeat all the blink dogs that are summoned. Either way, you can get Perrin's bow, which is an infinite ammunition weapon. Cool to see. And when you leave the crypt, if Perrin was awakened, he gives you a warning, and all the characters forget the warning, as before in encounter number 2. So there's an ongoing, overarching story here to do with Tinteros, whoever he is. I've already forgotten. And what do you do if your players know something the characters don't? Some players love the drama, others hate it, but you can say to them, the memory's hazy, it's a bit of a dream. So anyway, that was issue 5. We've done Neverwinter Wood, the skeletons. So next time we're doing issue 6. So now we're going to meet some orcs. Is that character orcs or is that enemy orcs? I'm not sure. We'll find out. Probably enemies, the looks of it. And leveling up. And more dice, of course. But I'm assuming leveling up is why we've got character sheets. So we should have some level 2s finally. Anyway, I guess we'll find out. But just follow the links that pop up to keep going the magazine or the series. Thanks for watching. Hope to catch you soon.